Hello, my name is Melanie Boyd, Development Director for the Charitable Pharmacy of Central Ohio, and I am joined today by Jennifer Seifert, Executive Director of the Charitable Pharmacy, and by Allan Zaenger, Founding Director of the Charitable Pharmacy. 2020 is not the 10th anniversary we imagined, and certainly the pandemic that we're in the midst of right now has given us many challenges, has offered questions, has allowed us to be creative, and yet we are taking time during our 10th anniversary to look at where we've been and to record that, think about it, and then also to look towards the future and to not only dream, but to dream big. So that's why we're here, and we're gonna knock right in. Allan, I know obviously, as we just said, you served as the Charitable Pharmacy's first director. What led you here?
It was actually a process, Melanie, that started really in about 2010 as I was working through a process of discernment. 4 years later, well, not 2010, but the process really started as my dad was going through hospice, and I started thinking about what was going to be next in my life as that sort of change was occurring. It actually took 5 years, and in 2009, I was at a healthcare conference where I just happened to be listening to Jeff Beal speaking at a healthcare conference about the future of healthcare, and he did a really nice job of setting the table for the day. And after he finished, I went up and introduced myself to him. I had been volunteering at the Physicians Free Clinic, and as part of that activity, the pharmacist who was leading that activity at the Physicians Free Clinic asked me one evening if I knew of anyone who would be interested in starting the Charitable Pharmacy of Central Ohio. And I said, well, yeah, I'd like to learn more about that. She sent me some information. I tried to respond. Nothing actually happened for 9 months. More than that, actually. It was in October then of 2009 when Jeff was leading this, introducing this program. And I went up and introduced myself, and he said, we talked for a few minutes, and I indicated that I was volunteering at the Physicians Free Clinic, and he said, working with a group that's trying to open a charitable pharmacy. I said, well, that's interesting. I've been trying to find out more about that. And he said, well, would you like to talk? And I said, sure. So I actually had a client meeting that I was leaving for later that day, and so I had several hours travel time to mull this over. I got back and talked with my wife Kathy about this, and proceeded to send Jeff background information about me and my practice at that time, and we got together, and along with two of the board members for the pharmacy at that time. And I basically came in and said I'd be willing to put together a proposal for the pharmacy. And that's actually how the ball started rolling. And so it was really, I think, it was a calling for me. And I think it proved to be what I was to do with the Charitable Pharmacy.
Mm-hmm. So I know I've heard the story, I know Jenny's heard the story of our first patient. Would you mind telling us about it for our viewers out there?
So it took a couple of months to get everything in order to open the doors for the pharmacy. There was a lot of groundwork that had been laid. So I came in with Mary Ellen Grace, and Kara Schiller, and we started getting everything ready during February. Towards the end of February, it was actually the last Friday of February in 2010. It was a Friday morning. We were basically doing all of the last minute preps for our opening on the following Monday of March, and the phone rang, and I'm not exactly sure why, but I picked it up because we weren't open. But I picked it up, and there was a woman on the other end of the line, and there was a bit of panic in her voice, and she said, "My husband was just released from prison. He has heart disease, and he doesn't have any medicines. Can you help me?" And I said, "Well, tell me his medicines." She went down the list, and we had everything that was on the list in stock, ready to go. And I said, "Yes, we will help you today." And so I said, "Do you know where we are?" She said, "Yes." I said, "Well, come to the door. The door will be locked, but we will meet you at the door." And so sure enough, about 30 minutes later, we're at the door, and she comes to the door with her husband. And we opened the door, and before I did anything else, she gave me a big hug, just out of gratitude. And it was maybe the most powerful moment in my career as a pharmacist. It validated what we were doing, and that our approach to meeting the needs of a patient who had no means, but had a need for medicines, and we were able to qualify the patient and provide him with the medicines that he needed that day. It was incredibly rewarding and a phenomenal start to what I think has been the mission of the pharmacy, to make sure that people have access to pharmacy services.
I think one of our messages that I've heard all of us sharing with the community is that our pharmacists get more hugs than any other pharmacist out there.
Well,
and I was
the first.
Right. And of course, I'll note that background there. I know, Allan, you're sitting in the choir room, which I think in the church served as your office during your time with us. So Jenny, I think, is in another choir room. So we've been very, very blessed to have the Livingston United Methodist Church and both of you. So I don't know, Allan, Jenny, if you want to come in. So Allan, you're in. You've gotten this great first hug. Everything's set. The doors get open. When does Jenny come into the picture?
Really quickly.
Yeah.
And part of that is that probably within a couple of weeks of opening, it became pretty clear to me that we were going to be busy, and that it was going to be important to have someone who could pick up the pace and work and work with a lot more of what would be. I guess I realized that this pharmacy was going to be a pharmacy, a high production pharmacy, very similar to what we see in high volume community pharmacies today. And it struck me that pretty early on that we were going to need someone who could bring that level of experience to the table. So yeah, that's when I started looking. And I don't know, Jenny, you probably can tell the story of better than I. You probably will recall this more accurately than me in terms of how we connected and how you became part of the pharmacy team at the Charitable Pharmacy.
Yeah, I tell our students, and you know, we've had now approaching 500 advanced interns through the pharmacy for 1 month rotations with us. So I often tell them that, you know, it is pretty incredible to be at a point in your career where you get a cold call. And that's what I did from Allan Zaenger. So I had, I just happened to look at my phone one day in my kitchen. I remember where I was at the moment, and there was a number that came up that I didn't recognize. And I thought, I just answered it for some reason. So much to you picking up that phone for the first patient, Allan. I don't know what possessed me to answer that unknown number that I got, but it was Allan Zaenger on the other end of the phone. And Allan said, you don't know me and I don't know you, but I got your name from a couple different people, and I have a position because I am starting a charitable pharmacy, and I wanted to see if you'd want to come and talk to me about it. And obviously it was one of those things I had never considered. This is the first one in Central Ohio. And so I said, yes, sure, I'll come talk to you. So we talked for about an hour. I listened to a lot of what was the excitement that Allan had about the pharmacy. And really, we talked about my background. And at the end of our first meeting, he said, I would love for you to join me in this ministry. And why don't you come back tomorrow and we'll talk about how that happens. And that's really how the journey began, was just picking up a phone call that I didn't know what was happening on the other end of the line. So I'll always be grateful for that conversation and those initial meetings and, that initial time that we spent here. From the get-go, we were busy. I think we had 24 patients a day after just a few days. And Allan and I were really doing all of the clinical interactions ourselves before we brought on our army of volunteers and our army of students. And so I remember at the end of each day standing in his office door and saying, I don't know how we do this. I don't know how we keep moving forward, because this is so incredibly exhausting. And I can't imagine how exhausting it is for our patients. But we really try to wrap our mind around it. I think, we're both incredibly grateful for a community that cares, that have come alongside the continued growth of the pharmacy. But boy, it's really rewarding to think back on that time together, those first few years.
So you came in week 2, is that right?
Yeah, I did have to, I had to step out of some other obligations that I had. I was teaching at the university. I taught pharmacology at OSU. And I really had to wrap up some of those things there, primarily. So, So it took me a couple weeks, and then I did come to the first open house and met some wonderful people, and a lot of excitement that happened when this first opened up. So I came to that and then started a couple weeks later.
Great. And you were director of clinical services at that time, right? Tell us a little bit about what that looked like, how that got developed, because you brought in the kind of the crux of the charitable pharmacies model, right?
Well, in so much as we knew it was going to be a community effort. And we knew that it would be an incredible place to educate students and for students to make an impact on patients. And so because I had stepped out of the kind of university life and had always been interested in teaching, it was just a natural fit to bring students alongside. So we originally chose and still have stuck to, we want those students that are full of didactic knowledge. So in their last year of their doctoral program, when they know all that they need to know to help us manage patients' medication regimens, really complicated regimens. So they're so smart. They almost have their terminal degree. And they come here and see so much of what is real world, so much application. So yes, that was kind of the original vision. Plus Allan, I knew that Allan and I knew that we wanted to continue that one-on-one personalized care. We couldn't imagine dispensing medication without talking with people. And if we talk with people, we need 20 to 25 minutes really to get through a complicated medication regimen. And so for us, we knew we needed extenders, and so we needed to build in that layered learning. So those advanced interns became really important. So now we have relationships with 3 colleges of pharmacy here in Ohio. We take almost half of each graduating class from Ohio State comes through here to work in an underserved rotation. So that was a big part of it. And then what that allows us to do, because we have this army of interns, is build out those clinical services. So build out disease state management. We can do vaccine services. We can do medication therapy management. So there's lots of things that we can do that are, as a buzzword, operating at the top of our license. We're working to do that. And I think that having the goal of excellent clinical care and being within the realm of underserved care really is something that we've carried forward for 10 years and been able to build on.
And I guess this is for both of you. I mean, certainly we have the students, but we have pharmacy residents as well. So what's that all about? How'd they come into the picture? What are the kinds of things that they've studied? I know a few of them have been published.
Yeah, so a mentor of thousands of pharmacists, and I think a good friend also of Allan is our friend Mary Alice Bennett, and she was the residency program director at Ohio State. And we went to her. She came and toured the Charitable Pharmacy and really fell in love, as we have so many of our volunteer pharmacists do, to walk in and see the mission. So Mary Alice became involved, and I remember going to her and saying, I think the next step is we need a resident pharmacist. And this was in 2012. And so we had our first resident pharmacist, who's still with us. Holly Fahey is on staff here. And what a resident pharmacist then allows us to do is add that next layer. So we have licensed pharmacists that are here with us for 1 year, and they're practicing with patients, directly with patients, for about 30 hours a week. And then they spend the other 20 hours a week doing projects and teaching at the university. So it is another excellent layer that helps us with our experiential education of those students. And then they provide great care. We recruit from across the nation. So we've had residents from New York and Chicago and some from Ohio State. So it is a very sought after residency program to work within an underserved care and all of the, I think, opportunities, but I think at our core, we also know it's relationships. We know that, that that's so important to what we do as we are working through barriers to healthcare for patients.
And I know we've certainly benefited from our relationships with some of the colleges of pharmacy. I know we've also had, from the beginning, fabulous relationships with all of the health systems. Allan, do you want to talk a little bit about how all of that started? Because they were at the table from the beginning, right? Oh, we lost you, Allan.
Mute. It was mute. Sorry. So before I even arrived, part of the steering committee process, or the steering group that was involved in framing the Charitable Pharmacy of Central Ohio, had done a lot of heavy lifting around contacting with the hospitals about the need for the charitable pharmacy. And one of the common comments that working group received was we will have patients who come into the hospital or are seen in the emergency room, and they leave with prescriptions and they don't get filled because they don't have the means to get them filled. And so I think early on, all the hospital systems understood the value of what the charitable pharmacy would be. Now, I don't think they had a real good feel for how that was going to happen, because the pharmacy was still a sort of an architect's rendition. And so once we started putting the face of the pharmacy into the community, actually being able to have the partners in the health systems come in and see the pharmacy, it solidified what their investment early on was and continues to be. And so one of the things that was really important for me, two things really with the pharmacy. One was that I felt it was very, very important to engage the patients at the time the prescriptions were filled so that they would understand the value of the medicines they were receiving and the importance of taking those medicines. And not only that, but early on, very often, I would say to patients, I will make sure that these medicines are available for you. Don't skip doses. Don't cheat on your medicines. Take your medicines. I will work to make sure that you have these medicines. So that was one thing that was very important, and that goes back to that actual face-to-face encounter in a private way, and that all came out of my vision for what I think pharmacy should be in a community setting, and that is patients working with the specialist in medication management, and that's what pharmacists do. So that was one of the key tenets to that. The other piece was wow, that was bad because I had the thought, now I've lost it. That's the problem with these.
We can move on and come back.
Probably should.
Just raise your hand if you remember. Well, so let me take you here then. So we have you, we have Jenny, we have the Livingston United Methodist Church where everything kind of comes together. There's some staff now. Mary Ellen's on board. We have students coming in. We've introduced residency. It's still pretty early. Allan, what was your vision in those early days? What did you expect to be happening in 2020, in 2030, in
now I remember
40? Oh, see, there you go.
Well, one of the other things with those who were investing large sums of money and continue to invest large sums of money, one of the critical pieces for me was to ensure that those partners understood that they were getting a return on their investment. So early on, we took the time to create an algorithm where we could connect the value of their donation to what the value of that medicine would be if those patients had to go to a pharmacy and pay for those cash out of their pocket. And so that was another element to making sure that we could keep those early investors at the table early on, so that we could sustain the work we were doing financially, as well as to demonstrate just how important this pharmacy was to people who otherwise were going without their medicines. So I think that, so those were the two things that were part of my early vision. One was to make sure that patients had that encounter and that experience with a pharmacist or advanced practice pharmacy student each and every time they came in. Because one of the things that gets lost in in sort of the message sometimes around healthcare is that patients see their doctor a couple of times a year, maybe 4 if they have a chronic condition, and they may see more than one physician. But if they're coming to the charitable pharmacy, they are seeing a practitioner, a health practitioner, every month. Every month. That's why we provide medicines. Well, now it's a little different with COVID-19. We're giving them more medicines, but early on, it was really critical to try to maintain that connection with patients so they understood the pattern that was important to develop around taking their medicines. So many of these patients didn't know where they were going to get their medicines again. So they would do those things like I mentioned. They'd cut them in half, or they'd skip doses. They'd cobble it together until they thought they would have the resources to get their medicines again. We took that off the table from the outset to say, take your medicines. We're going to see you every month. And then we started doing things that maybe they didn't understand the importance of. We would take their blood sugars. We'd do finger stick blood sugars. We would check their blood pressures every time they came in. And so they developed this expectation around what they should be receiving when they go to a pharmacy, and or giving them some background to empower them, give them some confidence whenever they were with a health practitioner to ask questions, to get more information so that they would be better around their healthcare. And the segue for that was, and this goes back to Holly Fahey being our first resident, she actually did a foundational piece of research that has been so important for the pharmacy, demonstrating all of those things that patients received from the pharmacy that helped them be better, more informed patients in the health system as a whole. So the other piece was just making sure that people who were donating to the pharmacy understood the value of what their donations meant. So that was the other part of the early vision, was just to really build together those two sets of people. And we were sort of in the middle. We were the hub between the patients and those who were making the donations. So we were where they came for that. And so it was that was a big part. And then to grow. I mean, gee whiz, the demand was, I mean, Jenny talks about the demand then. The demand has never been smaller than it is right now. I mean, it is huge demand right now. And so thanks for listening to me ramble a little bit there. But Jenny, you probably should talk a little bit about how COVID's changed some things and what we're doing now to still try to keep that connection with patients. It's been really, really hard. And you and the team, the staff, have done some amazing stuff here right now in the middle of this situation to make sure that patients still can get here, still get their medicines, still keep the connection.
Yeah. Oh, it's so great to hear you talk, Allan, and so enthusiastically about what we do with that direct patient care and that one-on-one care. And so, yeah, I would say the first few weeks of our COVID response, there was a lot of mourning for that direct patient care. I saw our residents just, they rose to the occasion, but boy, it was tough, because that's why they joined us, was to do that one-on-one patient care. So yeah, one thing that really saved us in COVID is that we started an appointment-based system. So we knew the next 750 people who were going to come to the pharmacy after we had to stop letting crowds of people into the building. And so that was incredibly helpful. And I will say, to maintain that one-on-one care, we do have, we're doing curbside pickup now. But we're having some really meaningful conversations curbside, 6 feet away at the door to the car. And then we do a lot of phone follow-up. On the back side of things, because we want everything to be ready when patients get here, we're doing, complete medication reviews. We're calling prescribers and calling the patients. It's very intensive work before the patient gets here to make sure all of their, yesterday we had a number of patients who had 18 to 20 medications. And so making sure we've got 2 months supplies of all of that logistically is challenging. One patient a student actually came in tears last week, a little teary, because she had gone out to give a new patient his blood pressure medications, and he was post-stroke. So he had some post-stroke medications. We had some diabetes monitoring supplies in there, had a new diagnosis of diabetes too. So quite a bit that she gave him, had him look through, kind of talk through curbside. And then she said, so I've made an appointment for you in 2 months to come back. Will Tuesday at 2:00 work again for you at that time? And he started crying, because he said, you mean I get to come back? He thought it was a one-time deal. And so she said, I just can't believe that I got to tell him, yes, you don't worry about your medications. We want you to come back on Tuesday, 2 months from now and call us in the interim. So, the COVID response has been, we have a new phone system coming in the next 2 weeks. We've had to expand our phone lines. We've had to invest in, upgrades here at the Livingston Methodist Church so that we can adjust to that kind of telehealth component. Mm-hmm. The good news is, the really good news, so a shining star in this, I was really worried at the beginning that people would stop taking their medicine. Mm-hmm. I was afraid that your blood pressure control and your mental health medications would take a back seat to the worries of COVID. And the really good news is our adherence to medication has held steady or perhaps even increased. So people are taking their medicine and they are coming back. So that's the really great news. And then we are just responding accordingly and just continuing. We don't know what the next year is going to bring. So really just trying to make those decisions for the best interest of our patients and our staff, just so that our staff can keep working for our patients. Mm-hmm. So yeah, it's interesting times. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, Allan, we are blessed to have had you come on and take the vision and to run with it. I know you passed the baton to Jenny in 2016, and as you indicated, we're so thankful to have her at the helm. Jenny, you mentioned something about looking forward. I think you may have said a little bit shorter than I was thinking, though. So I'm going to ask you to put on your visioning hat, I guess. And I know you've been thinking about this a lot. It's our 10th anniversary. Where do you see us in 2030, 2040, 2050?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, our first step is that we have a second location opening in 2021. Mm-hmm. And I think that allows us to build the foundation for replication. Mm-hmm. And so that's really exciting for us. And it's a great next step, like I said, to be really intentional about our expansion. Mm-hmm. So gosh, in 10 years, what I hope is, so we could go two different ways, where we are as an organization versus where we are as a healthcare system within our nation. Mm-hmm. We always say we wish that we weren't needed, that cost was not a barrier to healthcare. But we know that, that people struggle to get their medications. People that need multiple medications feel that injustice in their access to healthcare and to medication. So if I were to dream about where we could go as a nation, we would eliminate that. We would have everyone be able to see their doctor, to be able to have that conversation with their doctor, to receive diagnoses with care, and then for a pharmacist, a community-based pharmacist practitioner, to come in and say, this is your medication regimen. We are here with you. We want to make sure that you understand it and that we understand how you feel about it, and we adjust it based on what you need. So that is ideal. That is the place of the pharmacist and the team, is to manage the medications for chronic disease states. And so ideally, we're not here. Ideally, we look a lot different. I would like in 10 years, with those barriers removed, for there still to be a nonprofit pharmacy practice. And I think that's important because of the teaching aspect. If you think of a nonprofit teaching hospital, the layered learning that happens there to produce excellent practitioners, to provide continued excellent care for patients, is so important. So I would love to see a nonprofit pharmacy grow from that teaching hospital model. that's the dream.
Mm-hmm.
In the meantime, we'll open another location and we'll work to continue to advocate for patients to be able to get their medications. We are really excited. I think the next 10 years is going to bring a big scrutiny on the social determinants of health. Obviously, we've been looking at that for many years, but boy, this pandemic has brought incredible focus on the disparities that we're seeing, and those other pieces of health that are so important. We see it every day, from transportation to get here, to living in a safe home, to having access to education. So all of those things we need to keep in our conversation. We are an interprofessional practice in that we brought a social worker in, we've had dietitians in, we've had some nurses be associated with us. So I think that it's really important that we continue to move forward professionally and look at how we eliminate these disparities for people. But I would love to be just working in a nonprofit pharmacy that has this layered learning where we're teaching, but we've removed really the barriers. We're just a choice. We're a choice in the equation.
Great. Well, this has been great spending time with the two of you. I thank you for your time. I know you're both incredibly busy. Any final thoughts? Anything we didn't touch on for our viewers at home? Any final message?
I guess I'm off mute this time. I think that I have watched, early on, being right there in the middle of the pharmacy, grateful for being in a community that would embrace and take the risk in what has become a really critical piece in the healthcare delivery here in Central Ohio. So in that sense, to be in a community that values what is happening here has been really amazing for me. It's been early on for me, and I think still today it's encouraging, it's motivating for the keeping on with the work that has to happen on a day in and day out basis. So to the early and continuing partners of the pharmacy, it's a big thank you from me. Grateful for their generosity, grateful for their willingness to invest in something that really nobody knew what it would become, and here it is, a critical piece to making sure that a significant population of the community has access to their medicines. And I think that I'm excited about some of what Jenny's talked about from a future standpoint. I think all of those things are consistent with what my hopes were at the outset of the pharmacy, to be more of an integral part, not just a sort of a nice project, but really an integral part of the system that can in some ways even lead the way in how you provide patient-centered pharmacy services. That's where I think I look at that same future that Jenny has.
Great. Okay. Well, I think, unless you have something else, Jenny, I think our time here is done. So again, I thank you both so much, and thank you for watching. And here's to another 20, 30, 50 years when hopefully we'll be a choice, as Jenny said, and not a necessity. Thanks so much.